and welcome to Matt's Garage. In today's video I'm going to be talking to you about random electrical issues with PT Cruisers and how you can prevent them absolutely free. I know a lot of people seem to have troubles with their PT Cruisers, electrical issues and glitches and stuff, and I have a bit of a maintenance procedure that I like to do on the PT Cruiser's electrical system that I think prevents these issues. In any case, I have pretty good success with PTs and their electrical systems, so I'm hoping that if I share these tips with you, you can enjoy the same success as me with your PT Cruiser. So the obvious is cleaning up the battery cables. We want to clean up these ground points right here. These are the main ground points in the car, right down here by the left-hand strut tower. And so we're going to take those all apart and clean those up. Right where the transmission dipstick tube mounts, there's a ground point there, so we got to take that off, and we're going to go ahead and get in there and take the connections off the starter as well and clean those all up. This might seem like a lot of work, but trust me, it's worth it. This will prevent you from having future electrical problems with your PT Cruiser. So our first step is to get the connections apart, and then we're going to use this is synthetic steel wool basically. It's called a Scotch pad, and then we're going to use this dielectric grease to protect the connection from future corrosion or moisture intrusion. So you're going to need a 10 millimeter for this, and then a 15 for this. So first we'll get the 10 off here. And you can already see there's a bunch of corrosion in between there. I don't know how well that shows on camera. We'll go ahead and get that other one off right now. There we go, there's the outer nut. And then this pulls off. This pulls off. So this inner stud will just come out as well. Okay, so this stud here, I'm going to take a wire wheel and clean up all the threads and everything. Same with this bolt. So we'll just put those aside until I do that. I'll just clean up these eyes with the Scotch pad here. You basically just want to polish it. I like the Scotch pad over sandpaper or a wire brush because it doesn't leave coarse scratches, and so you actually get a nicer, you're kind of polishing the surface, so you still have full contact on the surface, whereas if you scratch it all up, it doesn't tend to make as good a contact in the future. Just make sure you get both sides, and I get all around the edges, everything. I get real fancy with it and try and polish it up and make it look like a new connection again. And then this is the main grounding eye. Just goes straight to the battery cable here. I hear about so many people that have electrical problems with their PT Cruisers, and I swear 9 times out of 10 it's just because of bad grounds. I always tell people, clean all your grounds up before you start trying to diagnose electrical problems. You could end up replacing your PCM or something, and a week later it could fry again, and that's because it wasn't grounded properly. Now, one thing about using one of these Scotch pads is you want to clean up all the fibers. You don't want those drifting around your engine bay. If they get into the internals of your engine, they could actually really hurt it. Okay, and now we'll clean up this battery connection too. See, the Scotch pad is nice because you can roll it right up and get it in there and clean inside the connection. That is the important part of this connection, is in there. The outside here is just cosmetic. I'm actually going to go get myself a fresh Scotch pad because this one's getting pretty worn. There we go, a little bit fresher piece of Scotch pad there. Just clean these all up. Like I say, I like to clean the whole thing right up to the wire, and then it will all get sealed in dielectric grease. You probably want to set aside a couple hours to do this by the time you take everything apart and put everything back together. So there we go, all those eyes are cleaned up, and now just clean up around here a little bit. And now I will clean up my fasteners here, and I'll show you that as well. You definitely want to get a pair of pliers for this. You don't want to try and hold that and hit your hand with the wire wheel. And there we go, just like brand new. Same thing here with this little self-tapper. Just make sure you get under the head really good. That's what's sealing against those wire eyes there. And I just like to do the heads too, just to be fancy. And then this nut will do here too as well. So there you go. These are like new again, so we're just going to coat them all in dielectric grease, coat all the wire terminals in dielectric grease, and we'll put it all back together here. So like I say, when you're working with these Scotch pads, you want to clean up the fibers. You don't want to leave them drifting around your engine bay. So I'm just going to vacuum this area up with the shop vac quickly before I go and put the dielectric grease on here. So now we'll put some dielectric grease on everything here, and I like to get pretty generous, and I especially like to seal in around the crimp, like right in here, really goop it in there so that it seals up the end of the wire there, and that way you don't get corrosion working down into the end of the wire. Basically just a nice coating on the whole terminal there. The nice bonus with this particular brand of dielectric grease is it smells really good. You can see these are sort of crimped together plates here, so you want to really all around the edges get around there and seal them up with the dielectric grease, and that way the corrosion won't work in between those plates over time. We'll smear a little around there, and then on the actual studs here we'll get pretty generous there as well, so that it's all up under the washer. Okay, and then that one just goes directly into the car. There's nothing that clamps behind that one. This one, the same thing, these coarse threads just to coat it up nice there. And then these ones stacked together. This is what I do, and I don't end up having very many electrical problems with any cars I own. In fact, the only electrical problems I really have is like worn out switches and normal stuff like that. I don't lose my cam and crank sensors or my PCMs normally or anything major like that. And I believe this is the key to why. Now one thing I like to do, I've got that right snugged up now. Now I'm just going to back it off a little bit. Bring it up. Back it off. Just do that a few times, and what I'm doing there is kind of making sure I have a good connection. I'm kind of scraping the dielectric grease to the side and forming a connection, because dielectric grease doesn't enhance the connection, it's actually non-conductive. It's just supposed to seal the connection. So it's important that you still have a connection, and if you tighten this down nice and snug, and also if you go back and forth like that a few times, you ensure you get a really nice firm connection. So now we'll just stick those eyes back on there. Okay, so same thing, and we're just going to back that off a touch, and then we're kind of gonna just go like that and move these connections around a bit. And then I'll snug it up for good here really tight. There we go. Now we'll come over here and tighten up our 10. Same thing, come up tight, back it off, and come up tight again. Okay guys, over here on the positive side there's a connection too. This is actually where the main power comes into your fuse box and basically distributes out and powers the whole car. So it's rather an important connection, and there's two 10mm nuts on it, so we'll just take those off. Now you do want to be very, very careful that you don't twist these off or you'll be in big trouble. So if they give you any grief, get some penetrating oil on them or whatever you got to do. Do not break them off. So we'll be cleaning up the nuts as well as the connector here. This is actually probably one of the most important connections in your entire electrical system on your PT Cruiser, so make sure you get it nice and clean. And then of course you want to get down in here and just use the edge of your Scotch pad and clean that up in there too, where the connection mates. Normally this connection doesn't get too corroded up just because it's sort of sealed in the box here, but it's still good to take it apart and maintain it. Okay, well, we're going to get in here with the vacuum and vacuum everything out. There you go, you can see I cleaned up those nuts really nicely too. So I'll just squeeze a little right on there. Smear it around. And obviously it goes without saying, but step one in this procedure is to disconnect your battery. Now you see how that's a little loose there, eh? So right before it snugs down, we're going to rattle it like that to make sure that we clear a nice contact patch. There, we've gone down finger tight there. Like I say, we'll wriggle it around quite a bit, and then let's snug it a bit more. We'll wriggle it again, and then we'll snug it right down. And I mean, don't overdo it so that you're breaking them, but also make sure they're pretty snug because you want a good connection there. And we might as well put a little dielectric grease on that stud just to keep it clean and pretty. We'll just pop that cover back on there. Okay, well we're just going to get this ground point off right here, and it's a 15 millimeter. It's the same bolt that holds down the dipstick tube mount there, so we'll just get at that with this 15 millimeter deep socket on my big ratchet here. There we go. From there I can get it out with my fingers, I believe. This is also the upper starter bolt here. The threads are actually in the starter housing that it's threading out of right here. And you don't want to go crazy when you torque it back down, because I've heard of scenarios where people have broken the ear off their starter actually with this particular bolt. So just be a little gentle when you torque it back down. There we go. And our grounding eyes is behind the dipstick bracket, so if you just pull the dipstick out a little bit, you'll be able to lift that right out from behind it. And there we go. Actually looks like somebody's cleaned that up before, so that's a good sign, but we'll clean it up again. We'll put a little bit of dielectric grease on it. That's the main grounding point. Your negative battery cable actually grounds there. It grounds over there too, on the inner apron, but this is its main ground point actually. Let's get in here with the Scotch pad and shine that up nice. And we'll go ahead and wire wheel the threads on the bolt that came out of there too. And we'll try and get in here and polish this up a little bit, although most of it's covered by that bracket. I'm just kind of pulling out on the dipstick tube to get that bracket pulled away a little bit, and then scrubbing the metal behind, so at least half of the area where that eye sits will be cleaned up nice and bare. I'm just going to get in here with the vacuum. I keep doing this after each step because I don't want those fuzzies off the Scotch pad floating around in the engine bay here. And now a generous dose of dielectric grease here. Make sure to get it all in the crimp here and everything. We'll slide that back in behind there. There we go. Now, like I said, we're going to wire wheel that bolt real quick. There we go. I think you can even see the difference on camera. And I'll just put a little bit of dielectric grease on the threads just to keep them nice. Just right on the tip, and then it will kind of run up the threads and seal it. So you may have to jiggle that around a bit to get everything lined up in there. There we go. So I'll just get that snugged up there. Just doing the final torque, and I'll just put a caption for the torque spec, but like I said, just don't overdo it here. Just a good snug pull on your ratchet is good enough. Okay, and it doesn't hurt to, like I do with all my grounds, I just like to tighten it up, and then I'll back it off a little bit, and then I'll tighten it up again, and that just kind of scuffs that grease to the side and make sure you have a really good point of contact. I'll just turn you guys upside down for a minute to give you a view of that. Not that one, but that one right there. So that is the main grounding point. I know it's a bit of a pain in the butt location, but it is important. Now you can see the connections on the starter in here. They're pretty easy to get at right now with everything removed, so we're going to go ahead and do them as well. First I'm going to just clean up this positive battery cable real quick. Okay, well I'm going to show you something I should have maybe done on this one, and that's clean up the bolt. I mean the bolt's just to clamp it. It doesn't make any of the connection, so it's kind of non-vital, but it's a nice thing to do. And on the positive one, you can see there is an eye under the bolt head, so I want to get that out and clean it to make sure that that eye is making good contact. And it's a little stuck in there with all the corrosion, so I'm just going to get my channel locks over here to help out. You can see all that corrosion on there, so I'll get that eye cleaned up nicely there. So same thing, 3-inch wire wheel on my drill and just buff that up. These are just the little things that add up to make an old car old. That's why I go through and I renew these little things, and it makes all the difference for reliability, you know, for long-term drivability of an older car. You got to do all these little things. I'm doing the exact same thing to my old Benzes. I do the same thing to my old Fords. It's not a Chrysler thing, it's just an old car thing. Alright, so we got that cleaned up nice, little dielectric grease on that, and put it back together. Make sure we get that nut cleaned up as well. So we got a lot of fibers in this area. We're just going to vacuum here quick. So we're going to goop this up really good with dielectric grease. Now you can see there's a square in that terminal there, so you gotta, there's a square on there as well. Got to have that lined up or else you'll kind of crush the terminal. And there's a square in here, so have everything lined up so this sits flush in here like that, and then you won't have to hold that end when you tighten the nut down. Of course I can't snug this up till I have it back on the battery. And then we'll put a little dielectric grease down around the crimp here. Keep the corrosion out of the crimp. Just put a liberal amount up inside the terminal, all on this blade everywhere, because over time all that corrosion builds up on there and it all adds to the resistance in your car's wiring system, and that's when you start to get electrical faults. Okay you guys, there's only 2 connections on the starter. This one red wire and also the green one is held under a 13mm nut, and then the other one is just a plug-on wire here, just a single wire, single terminal, just a blade connection. So we'll take that 13 out first, and what you want is a 1/4-inch ratchet with a short 13 on it. The nut is indented in the end of that red connector there. There you go, you can hear I broke it loose. And from there I can get it with my fingers if I just use the socket on there. So there's the green one. You can see it's really in desperate need of cleaning. Actually, there's a lot of corrosion on there. There's our nut. We'll clean that up as well. There's your main starter wire. And you can see it's pretty corroded up too, so we'll get in there and we'll clean that up, and we'll also get back in here and polish up that stud. Now the other one, you just squeeze. You'll feel a squeeze tab on the side of it. Right there. And you can see it's just one of those. So all you want to do is put a little dielectric grease in that when you put it back on, but clean up that blade on there, that blade terminal, to scrub that up with the Scotch pad. So we're going to go ahead and do all that here. So same thing, you just get in here with your Scotch pad and shine her up. I think we're going to go ahead and do the alternator connection as well. Okay, so this connector, as you can see, it's a little challenging to get into, but I got in it. You can see I got it all shiny there. I wrapped a Scotch pad around my finger and just kind of spun it in there. And then on the back side there's a bit better access. So I got that all shiny too. Got this all shiny. I got in there, I scrubbed the terminal up and the blade connector. So now I just got to put a little dielectric grease on everything. So this wire actually goes to your alternator. That's the power to your alternator. I'll just get all down in around the crimp there on that wire. And just remember, that wire goes on top of that wire on the same terminal. And then don't forget to do up that blade connector. We're just going to reach in there and put a coating on there as well. And we'll plug that back in. You can see I've shone up the nut too. It's ready to go back on. So we'll this wire goes on the terminal first, the red one, and that one sort of has to position in a certain way on there to go all the way on. That's the idea of the red thing. And then there's a notch in the side for the green wire to slide into place here. There we go, the green wire's in place. Now we'll just get the nut on there. You may have to use your, you'll have to use your socket to get the nut started. It's kind of sunk down into that red connector, so just get your socket and get it started with that. We're just snugging those wires up with the ratchet again. And really, to change your starter out would only be one further step than what we did here, and that would be just removing the bottom bolt, which is also 15 millimeter. And then you just got to wriggle the starter out of this hole, which I think you can wriggle it out where my arm's reaching in right now. So you don't want to overdo it on tightening these, but snug them up pretty firm. Just remember that you are on a brass stud, copper stud, whatever, on the starter there, so you don't want to overdo it. And then I'm just going to do my usual. I've got it snugged up there, so now I'm going to reverse my ratchet, break it loose again, just half a turn, and then I'll tighten it up for good. There we go. Now this is a fusible link here, so if your alternator goes out and you replace your alternator and it's still not working, it's probably because that fusible link is fried. So that's something you might want to check into. I have seen these be replaced before. Okay guys, well, I'm doing a bit of a touch-up clip here. This is months later, but anyways, we cleaned up all those grounds over on that side of the engine bay, and now there are 3 more over on this side that I'm going to show you. I've already cleaned them, so just take them apart the same as we did over there, clean them all up, put them back together. This one is the ground for the cylinder head of the engine, so it attaches on the upper motor mount with a 10 millimeter on this end, and there's a little tab through a hole there you'll have to line up, so to get that all apart and cleaned up. And then right down here, if you reach down here, you'll feel the other end of that strap, and it's under a 13 millimeter bolt. It's quite a long one, threads into the aluminum there, so get a little ratchet or ratcheting wrench in there. But that's a really vital one. It's vital that your engine be grounded everywhere, because we've already cleaned up the ground over here on the block, and now this is the one on the head. So what that does is it prevents electrolysis from traveling through your head gasket, which could cause it to fail prematurely. And then there is a third ground point down in here for your lighting harness, and it is a 10 millimeter self-tapper, so just get that out and cleaned up as well. There's a little ground strap hiding here for the hood. It's 8 millimeter on each end, so we'll get those off. Work a little better with the extension on there. Don't want to hit the hood. So there we go. Every ground is important, so we'll clean it and the screws. Of course, a little bit of dielectric grease on those connections. See, I cleaned those all up. A little bit on the threads of those. Okay guys, we're just under the PT here, and this is the back of the alternator here. Actually looks like it was recently replaced, but we still want to clean up the main connection here, the power coming off of it, and I believe it's 13 millimeter on there, so we just got to get this cover off, and then we'll get that nut off. So it's just 2 squeeze tabs on the cover here. Squeeze those in and just pull off just like that, and there you go, 13 millimeter. And the one thing is, absolutely make sure your battery is disconnected when you do this. I'm just going to use my 13 mil ratcheting wrench to get at that. Somebody really had that torqued on there. There we go, I think I can get it by hand now. Okay, so a nut and a washer. And there's that eye, and I don't know if you can see on camera, but it is pretty corroded up. Good thing we did this. Get up there with the Scotch pad. It's hard to do one-handed, but there we go. And now we're just going to get up there to the stud. So I'm actually just going to blow down from the top here with an air gun. That way any fibers that are loose in this area will kind of blow out and down here, and then I'll vacuum after. Okay, so time for some dielectric grease. I'll just get some on my finger, and then I can get up there and smear it around. There we go. I think that wire was actually routed wrong. It was sitting up towards the manifold, and that's not right. Okay, and we'll get that lock washer and nut back on there. That tab sort of has to go in the notches on the backing plastic piece there, the piece that the cover clips to. You'll see what I mean. It just keeps it from turning as you tighten it. There we go. It doesn't need to be super tightened like the last person had it. Just a nice snug pull on that wrench will do. And then get that cover clip back in place. And boom, you're done. So yeah, the wire should be facing down like that, not up towards the manifold. There's the clip here on it. It probably clipped into something on the original alternator, and this aftermarket one probably doesn't have that or something. Anyways, as long as they're not up against the manifold, we're good. So of course, when you're cleaning up all your electrical connections, don't overlook your battery terminals. You want to scrub them up too, and the Scotch pad works great for that. And of course a little dab of dielectric grease. I've got quite a bit on the terminals, so I'm not going to get carried away. If you are experiencing electrical problems with your PT Cruiser, I always recommend this. What I'm doing here is the first step, cleaning up all the ground points and electrical connections. If you're still having glitches and issues after that, try changing your ignition switch. Not the lock part, but the actual electronic part. It's a separate piece from the part where you put your key in. And I actually have a video on replacing that. The part is, for like an aftermarket part, it's only like $15–16, and it's like half an hour's work to change it. And I have a really good video that I'll link up in the description. And I have had a PT with glitches before, and that was the problem. Things like my dash lights would flicker on and off at night, and different things like that, and even things like battery drains and stuff can be caused by your ignition switch. So that's another good preventative measure, especially if your PT's got higher mileage on it. That's something to look at. Well, there you go, guys. That's how you restore the performance of your electrical system and make sure your car remains reliable. I do hope you found the video helpful and informative. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and have yourself a great day.